Representing both associations, different innovations. We have somebody who was nominated for an award and probably should have won it, but he's here from Nugaya. We have Tina from Renewable, and we have Peter Spoor from GreenTech. I hope you enjoy the session. I'll go and sit, which is quite uncomfortable. Let me start by going through by you one by one. Introduce yourself briefly and share your perspective on growing media.
Is this one? Yeah. I'm Alex Miller, and I'm the Science Coordinator for Growing Media Europe. Growing Media Europe is a Brussels-based industry NGO that represents growing media companies as well as national associations of growing media companies. So while primarily a lot of the focus of Growing Media Europe is looking at policy at an EU level, we've recently expanded the scope to look more at the science side of things for growing media more broadly, so investing in science projects and supporting research into growing media. So my role as science coordinator is to facilitate and encourage knowledge sharing between industry partners as well as research partners, but also to gather and communicate recent advances of growing media research and data to the general public, but also policymakers and other stakeholders. So I've been in this role for 1 year now, and a lot of my role has also been focused on the LCA project for Growing Media Europe. So we have an LCA guideline and tool which measures the environmental footprints of growing media, but I'll get into that a bit later.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. I think I see your Secretary General in the public, Cecilia. Cecilia had a very nice quote yesterday saying that we're a very small sector, but with a very big impact. So I think it's good that we now move to people who are at the innovation part and a little bit more established in introducing themselves. And Tina, you can go first, ladies first.
Oh, okay, thank you. My name is Tania Pina. I'm the founder and CEO of Renewable. We're headquartered in New York City, so I'm coming here from the United States. And ultimately, we see ourselves as circular innovators. So we take a different variety of materials and we can turn it into different form factors as it relates to grow mats, plugs, blocks, slabs. So we look at circular materials for substrates, but we also take food waste from food production, manufacturing, and we turn that into standardized organic hydroponic nutrients. So here really with an incredible panel of innovators, I see all of us as innovators, and there's certainly a variety of solutions that it's really important for us to address today.
Thanks.
Yeah, my name is Peter Spoor. I work for GreenTech as its head of R&D. I've been working there for about 10 years now. We supply rock wool growing media solutions to the high-tech controlled environment agriculture sector. I have a bit on our innovation. We have a team of developers that focus on innovation across the entire life cycle of our product. So we have people that are involved in the materials themselves, the chemists, the process engineers. We have people from marketing, the more the plant scientists that do the research in that area. And of course, last but not least, we have a lot of focus also on the sustainability of our product. So we have people that are involved in putting our recycling services in place in our various markets, but also developing new second life solutions for our material.
Thanks. Cheers.
Good morning. Andre, thank you for having me. My name is Tjeerd de Loze. I work for Maan Bio-Based Products. I'm the product manager and commercial manager. Maan is maybe the odd one in this group because we don't have a long history in horticulture. Maan has a technology which is called 3D printing and hot melt technology. And we invented about 10 years ago the Grocoon, which is a small biodegradable pot which you can fill up with your own substrate. That was our first entrance into the horticultural sector. We were initially asked to glue soil particles together, and because of our background in gluing technology, there was a logical idea. But we decided against it because of non-biodegradable ingredients you have to put into this glue, and we decided that the Grocoon was maybe the good solution. As I told you, we have little knowledge of horticulture, so we teamed up with Klaas Mandelman, which is one of the largest substrate suppliers in the world. They're selling Grocoon, and quickly after our cooperation, they asked us, okay, it's nice that you print a 3D pot, but can you also print what goes inside? Because they see a shortage of peat and basically shortage of reliable and renewable substrates. So our newest innovation is called Nigaya. Nigaya is an ode to Mother Earth. Ni because it's new, and Gaia of course because the goddess of Earth is the Queen Gaia. The idea of Nigaya is not only that it's a nice product which you can easily root and you can produce a good plant, but it's also a product we can produce on site. That was one of the questions we got from Klasman Delman. Because of them harvesting peat and peat source materials and ship it all over the world, can we maybe produce on site? And we have now our innovation, which Andre was referring to, that is a small machine which can make a round plug, and it's going to be a product which is going to be on site. So we want to sell this machinery and this technology and have production sites basically close to the grower. The idea is if you make the volume at the grower, you save a lot of transport, because you can put almost one container of raw material is equivalent to 40 containers of a round plug. So that's our mission, and that's my introduction.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of things are happening in the world of growing media. There's a pressure from society. There's a drive for alternatives. So what are things, sort of struggles or challenges that you face, Tinia, in moving forward, scaling up, or where would you appreciate support, or what are the things that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think the question was like, where is there more support? And I think from like policy and the public sector is, I think it's just like, so I have mentioned this comment earlier with someone else at the conference, and there needs to be like symposiums where you have farms, they present their challenge, and then technologists, collaborators, others that are in the industry to be able to say, okay, well, I'm representing this solution. I have this type of material or this type of product that can address this, so that matchmaking happens instantly. And these venues are great opportunities to meet one another, but I think like everyone needs to be efficient with time. If I can very quickly and directly, because that's just my communication style, say, here's my problem, and I think there's going to be a lot more value created and much less time needed. So I would say having more venues or events of that nature could just resolve things much more quickly.
Sort of like a digital dating app for substrates and growers.
Not so much an app. I mean,
or something which facilitates, because we're all globally active and we cannot always travel.
Very true. I mean, I think a test case would be in person.
Yeah.
And then perhaps to scale it through an app, possibly.
Yeah. Interesting. Peter, anything you would like?
On the policy side?
Yeah, for instance.
Yeah, I think we get good support. If you look at it from our point of view in innovation, there's a lot of support from governments in terms of financing to start up projects, also together with research institutes. So I don't think we're lacking there. I think just in general, I would say more support in a positive, let's say, positive vision on controlled environmental agriculture in general. Yeah, I think there isn't much recognition for that. You see a lot of recognition in other, let's say, on other solutions. But I think that would, I think that's something I would like to see.
Yeah.
What I would like is to help, what would help us basically is that because we are a biodegradable, partly bio-based plug, we don't seem to fall into a logical legislation. And we had the same thing with Grocoon, that we were put under fertilizers and they made a group of biological degradable pots, and that maybe was a good solution at the time, but now that we are going further, we get all sorts of questions related to fertilizers, and we are not a fertilizer.
Yeah.
And we are a bit in doubt whether or not we should be a substrate, because actually we don't have an exchange capacity. We just hold water, we hold the plant, and we hold air. So should we really fall under a fertilizer or a substrate category? Because we have very little in common with those products.
Yeah, I can see some connection with the stone wool, which is of course also an inert material which holds water, nutrients, and and all kinds of other things. And we consider ourselves a growing media, so you may come to our site. That's fine.
We'll see.
And in the end, of course, I think now, Alex, for you maybe two questions. One, you represent the industry also with Cecilia in Brussels, which is, I think, really key. But also, of course, keeping in mind that we want to move to more sustainable substrates and more sustainable food systems. And I think there's an important role for GME to play, and you do that. Can you share a little bit on what you're doing there?
Yeah, so I guess the main thing that GME is doing is, and already has done, is coordinating the different growing media companies to come together and create an LCA guideline. So this guideline details how to calculate the environmental footprints of growing media across 16 impact categories. This follows the official EU PEF methodology, which is product environmental footprint. And this was developed and launched in 2021. Then we also developed a tool to easily calculate this. So use that guideline that's on our website, and then be able to have individual companies be able to calculate footprints of their different mixes. Now, this year, we're already updating the guidelines to version 2.0, and then following that, the LCA tool as well. So I think our industry has been kind of a front runner in developing these industry-wide LCA methodologies. A lot of other industries are now starting to do those. In terms of other ones, say the Flori-PEFCR, which is the product environmental footprint category rules for cut flowers and potted plants. That was launched this year and directly references our existing guidelines. This will also be the case next year for the fresh produce PEFCR, which is fruits and vegetables, and that will also reference ours. So I think we've already done a lot in terms of measuring the footprints, but there's still a lot of research that can be done with this data and extending that data and collaborating with partners along the value chain.
Yeah, and of course the growing media footprint is input for the growers, so they can calculate the footprint per kilogram of produce, which is in the end what we're doing it for.
Yeah, I think it's
but
always,
you need to have the basics as well.
I think it's always important, especially looking at growing media, looking at the footprint. That I always see it as three different levels of footprints. So there's the footprints of the individual materials, so wood fiber, peats, rock wool. But then there's also the footprint of the mixes, so how you mix things together, and then what is the overall footprint of that. But the third level is the footprint that is influenced by the growing media itself. So the quality of the growing media has an effect down the whole plant production chain. A small change in yields, if it was, say, decreased, that means there's a lot higher energy costs, for example, or food waste. So the overall footprint can be a lot higher just because of the differences in the quality of the growing media. This is arguably the most important part of measuring footprints for growing media, but it's also the most difficult because you have to collaborate with everyone along the value chain, and it's conceptually more difficult. And then convincing policymakers, that's a whole other step.
Yeah, that's a different trade. So even from my experience, I see the request from growers and from the sector for footprints increasing over the past years. Tina, is it something you see in the US as well? Footprints or LCAs, or are sort of customers asking for footprints from your material?
So we haven't, so we don't work directly, we're in touch with a lot of like retailer groups, distribution groups from the consumer side of things, but the questions or solicitations for our LCA, which we are having one done as we speak, and you raise a great point about the footprint of the actual yield performance or performance of the product. It's coming from the farms. More increasingly from farms outside of the US, but I will say a lot of the progressive supermarkets in the US, like Whole Foods, Kroger's, they are positioning themselves to be forward on that topic. They're pulling that as well.
Yeah. Good. So I want to make this an interactive session as well. So I don't. We've already had some insights in the different materials and different perspectives. Are there already questions from the audience that are sort of burning and people, or is everything clear so far? I guess that's a yes. Cool. Is there then maybe a question to sort of like the innovators? Is there anything you could maybe learn from the others? Geert, we'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. You know, the Dutch industry got great because of working together and cooperating. And I think I don't see each other here as competition. I see each other as partners for the same mission. And definitely, if you look over the edge and look at other people's businesses, we can learn a lot. And we are the new kid in the block, so yeah, there's a lot to learn for us looking at other people.
Yeah, no, we already, we had a quick chat this morning, and we already agreed the market is big enough for all of us.
Yeah, and the main thing is growers want to have a choice. There's people who are sticking to a peat-based or soil-based substrate. That's fine if they're happy with that. If they want to go to a rock wool solution because it's reliable in their system, I think there is more than one solution, and that growers have the choice and let them follow what is important in their system.
Yeah. Please.
Thank you. All great points. There's enough abundance in this world for everyone, but I do want to say that one thing at least I see, and maybe the others on the panel could relate, is that growers really have to communicate what your needs are, right? And be in the same conversation what your needs are and how that impacts your current irrigation strategy. So for example, we were in a conversation with a grower. They're new to growing microgreens and they wanted to be able to use a deep water culture rafting system. Currently it's not set up for that, but they wanted to grow directly from within their plastic clamshells in the rafting system. And so this was a customized kind of mat solution. And as a product innovator, manufacturer, you have to be ready to kind of push them through that process, because a lot of growers have the ideas on how to make things more efficient, get it to the retailer, get it to the consumer in the right form factor that they want to see it. They just don't know how to make it happen. So I think, we're very lean. We try to be as agile and flexible to the market needs, but it's really important from a grower perspective to try to present that information in the most simplest way possible, because we can customize and we can really provide, at least from what Renewable does, the surety that there's no foodborne pathogens, heavy metals, pesticides. We provide that screening up front, but anything else that you need, just communicate it, because otherwise it's hard for us to pull that without that background context.
Yeah, and just to add something there, I think that's a very good point, because Andre, I don't think it's really about just us working together. I think it's about working together up and down the value chain as well. So I think cooperation with growers, cooperation with the research institutes, with other suppliers in the sector, also amongst the growing media sector, I think is crucial for us to take on this challenge, right? Because I think, as Sheer said, there's been a lot of focus on peat, right? I think everybody knows this, yeah? If we're really gonna make that step, if we need to make that step to reduce the peat we use significantly, and I'm not saying that we need to, I'm not gonna make a judgment there, then we're gonna need all the solutions available. I think we're gonna end up in a situation where we won't be able to solve that with one single material anymore, yeah? And that's to their point as well. I mean, I think it's going to be a game we can all play at.
Yeah, I see you want to add something, and then
one last thing
is
that each of our materials acts different, right? So you have to give the time to acclimate and to adjust your irrigation schedule accordingly. It's just like driving a brand new car. A BMW is not going to drive the same way as a Mazda, and vice versa. And the reason why is because each of our material characteristics and the physical characteristics are very different. So how the nutrients are going to be acclimated in the fibers or whatever material it is going to be different. The pH levels, ours is inert along with yours and Grodan's. So just allow for that time. And again, going to Peter's point, close communication, we can help you dial that in so it's a little bit more plug and play, but I haven't seen any substrate to date, having been doing this for the past 2 years and doing extensive research, of one substrate solution that hits on every nuance perfectly and is purely plug and play for your system.
I fully agree, Tinia, and also to you, Peter. And I think actually, if you look at what we need to cooperate with, it's not just the people in our business, but also the greenhouse builders and the irrigation people. You have to look at the whole scope. We are asked for Nigaya to make it fit into a system sometimes where it's designed for peat, and it's designed in a shape that the peat will not go out into the water. But since Nigaya is inert and we don't lose particles, we don't have that problem.
Yeah.
And then it's very difficult, and I agree with you, that sometimes the grower says, I want your product to be this, and then I want to use it in the system, which we already know it's not actually perfectly designed, and it won't work. And therefore we need the understanding of the grower, but we also need the irrigation people to think and help us with creating solutions for a new product.
Yeah. Alex, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I think it's important to think about the drivers of all these innovations. We've spoken about sustainability. I think that's one of the key drivers, sustainability on many different levels. But one of the biggest drivers for innovation is that the market is expanding rapidly. So some estimates put it at 400% increase by 2050 of use of substrates globally. That is massive. So this is a huge amount of substrates that we need, and they need to be fit for purpose for each of the different growing needs. This is a massive challenge. I also think for that reason it's not so competitive as well, because we need every single solution to meet these challenges. And I think to go back to some of the policy and the communication there is, politicians aren't aware of this, and they aren't aware of these problems. So, I mean, part of the role at GME is we talk to decision makers. We need to make people aware that this could be a problem down the line where maybe we don't have enough materials. Because it's not just having the volume of, say, wood fiber, for example. You need to have the right wood fiber that works within the right contexts. So there are massive challenges that are going forward, and that's kind of the driver of all these different innovations in the research sector and also industry R&D.
Yeah. Yeah, now I would say the industry and the growing media are currently, the distribution is what it is. That's for a reason, so it's probably also not very easy to find alternatives in good quality, in the quantity at the place you need them. So I fully agree with you. Yeah. By now, any questions from are we still on a track of very clear? Tom.
Yes, thanks, Andre. Thanks for all the panelists. A super interesting topic. I just want to touch a little bit on the image problem that peat has developed in the last, let's say, decade, and it's culminating to many different, let's say, misperceptions. And I know that we're a sector which is always perceived as something as nice to have, but not essential, because we're a niche. And we grow beautiful little tomatoes and this and that, but in the agriculture context, it's such a bizarre kind of situation that we are talking about sustainability when we don't really have any let's say recognition of our efforts as a whole. And I'm wondering, is that a systemic problem that we have because we're talking too scientific, too much lingo, or is it the scale, that also the niche, or what do the panels think? Where should we really push our ideas for a better image as a sector? I mean, of course, I have my ideas, but I'd love to hear.
I know, but we'll start with the panel. Then you can share your ideas.
I can start. Yeah, I guess there's two parts of your question, right? The niche part and the image part, right? I think the world will need to move towards more sustainable growing practices, right? And I think we're well positioned to supply solutions there. If I look at some of the markets we're looking at, you see, it's not necessarily here, it's been raining for 1 year straight, but okay, there are other areas of the world where it hasn't rained for years, right? I visited one a few months ago. You see that, there's consistent drought. You see that they're suffering from decades of intensive agriculture combined with climate change. Yeah, and the awareness is there. The motto is every drop counts, and I think as climate change starts to take hold, every drop will start to count more and more. And I think we're going to be there to provide the solution. So I don't think it's going to be as niche as you think. I think there's a lot of potential for our business towards the future. It's expected to grow by 4 times, I think, to 2050. And I think we have a good story to tell on the image side, that we're there to support this transition to more sustainable growing. But yeah, on that other side of your question, I can't answer because that was kind of my point at the beginning, is to get recognition for this more sustainable way of growing. I just wanted to address that niche part. I think that's going to change.
I think one of the challenges, of course, is that a lot of the discussions are being led by emotions by some people, which are very difficult to fight with facts. We can throw facts at anyone, but it doesn't always help. So I think we all have a common interest in telling the story, and I thought maybe we should the session should have been called Root Zone Collaboration instead of Root Zone Battle, because we all have a common interest to work together. Cheers.
Maybe I can answer to your question a little bit more, the way how we feel it. You know, horticulture is always an easy part to sort of point the finger, say they're doing things wrong, and it's difficult to change the minds of the people. If we look at electrical cars in Holland, a lot of people driving electrical cars, and we all feel happy because we're not polluting. But at the same time, my car is driving on coal because we don't have enough green energy from. So the question is, what comes first? And I think those transitions, you have to look at a long-term thing. And if you point your finger at 1 year, you can say, nice, those electrical cars, but we don't have enough electricity. But actually, it's sometimes the chicken and the egg, and you need to give time for an industry to adapt to a new way. And I agree with you. If you see how much the horticulture sector has changed in the last 30 years that I've been looking at it, from many parts, from pesticides, from name it, water resaving, there's been a lot of good developments, but we just need the time with all the efforts of all the people, to make it work. But to change the minds of the consumer and to have the right arguments, that is a difficult one. And we as MAN, we cannot influence that. We can only say that we want to be a front runner in this business, and we want to do the good thing, and then we hope that it resonates in other people's minds too.
And I would just say that, I think we have to reframe things from a position of fear. I personally try not to be in a fear-led kind of life, and use this as an opportunity. So let's preserve what we have as the remaining amount of peat. Let's save the soil. They're estimating that by 2060, topsoil will be fully depleted globally. And so if we can use this opportunity to use soil-less cultivation to kind of preserve those assets, those natural resources that may be a little bit more, have higher resonance with consumers.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I think Alex, and then I'll come to you. You don't have to.
I mean, this is something that we do a lot, is we need to be talking about the role that growing media plays, not just its impact. We need to say, how does growing media enable the growth of different crops? How does it increase the sustainability of the entire food chain? So I think reframing it in terms of the use and the purpose of growing media is very important. And then on the topic of sustainability itself, I think honestly the peat debate is too narrow. It's looking at peat versus non-peat and assuming that that's all what sustainability is. We need to be looking at all the different impact categories. We need to logically look at the data and see what is best. So I think there needs to be a lot more data and collaboration being put into this decision making.
Cool. Yeah, maybe just to add to that, or just ask you a question, or on that question of support. I mean, I would like some support there, right? Because if you look at other ways of growing, and I'll name it, organic, you just have to say that one word and it sinks in, right? But if you look at soilless or CEA, you basically need a white paper that thick to explain it. So I think we need to work on that side of the equation too.
I mean, that's very tough for us, is that we have lots of issues that we care about and we have a lot of detail that we want to communicate, but sometimes people don't know what growing media are. So it's a big barrier just to get to that first part, let alone actually detailing the problems we have within the sector and how we can fix them.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would say my takeaway is that I like what you're saying, Tina, have positive framing. Let's say what we do want and not what we don't want. So that at least gives direction. I think we should all be telling at least the same story about growing media being important to be very efficient on resources with all the benefits that comes from it. And then we probably need a little bit more help in spreading the story, because we're all too small to change consumer behavior or opinion. So that will take a long time. Tom, do you want to share your perspective now, because you asked the question, and I think that would be helpful for the audience to understand and build on your expertise.
This is an endless discussion in some ways, but yeah, I wanted to bring in an idea which has only recently emerged, and that is that, of course, in an agriculture discussion, you talk a lot about the challenges that nutrition has in growing protein of the future. Mm-hmm. And we're in a plant niche, and as I said earlier, I mean, whenever you have a conversation with anybody in agriculture decision making, I mean, they like what we do because it's nice, and they like to have it, huh? But you can also live without it, huh? It's really not that essential, huh? I mean, I beg to differ, of course, because nutrition is a complex thing, and we need a lot of good plant-based nutrients. However, the protein question is something of an interest to see also from a CA perspective, because there are now claims to say that the future protein will be actually plant-based, mm-hmm. or has to be plant-based, and it cannot be soil-based, because that will never work. I mean, we all agree, right? So that whole idea that all of a sudden that we also grow not just nice to have but essential, let's say, crops, mm-hmm. within a CA context, that's something that I think as a interesting new perspective to look at. And also then talking about scale, that's where it's really interesting. I mean, Alex, I was really impressed when you said that's a 400% increase in expected on this. I mean, projections are always projections, of course, but we all agree that it will grow. I mean, there's been anticipated that the daily intake of, let's say, fruit and vegetables for the global population needs to triple just to stay healthy. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of work we have to do to grow. I mean, if you talk to growers today that they have to triple their production in whatever they grow, they get a little bit teary-eyed. So.
Yeah. Now, for whoever was here yesterday, we all know the projections for global population growth. We need to feed the world. Question is still, where's the population growing, and where's controlled environment agriculture? I'm not sure if there's always a perfect match. But also with the changing climate zones, of course, we see the drought and the heat in Spain, California. Yeah, at some point the only way to grow something may be indoors, in a controlled environment agriculture. And then we can debate whether these are nice or need to haves. But I think there are a lot of nice to have that we could do without, but which we find very difficult to get rid of. So that's going to be a long way to go.
Andre, maybe to add, I fully agree with what you've said. If we look at mega cities, the cities we will have in 2040, how are we going to feed the city of 20 million people if we are responsible for the food supply? It has to be indoors and closer to the people. I think we all agree on that. And I think there we can just embrace that development and say we have a solution for that.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, the lady over there.
Hi, I was just wondering what your thoughts are of the role of policy and government policy in the future of this, because I was just thinking about your electric car example. So we're from Canada, and they said all the cars have to be electric by 2030, but that's actually stifling innovation. Because why not hydrogen cars? Why don't we just say we need clean and we need innovation, and if governments are supporting a very specific thing, they're not leaving room for all the different types of media and all the different types of substrate. So, obviously that's electric cars, but when we look at agriculture, how can governments create policy and legislation that allows for we might not even know the solution yet. So how do we really enforce that rather than picking a specific industry that just is like on the bleeding edge or is first?
That's a great question. Sorry, I kind of just took it.
You go for it.
So that's a great question. I'm kind of going to answer it, maybe perhaps not directly, but as close to it as possible. What I have heard from another grower in Canada that's interesting and very relevant is that Canadian policies are starting to work towards incentivizing from a tax law perspective growing up versus growing out because of the lack of land due to development and so forth. And so that is indirectly going to benefit us all, right? Like now we need to optimize yields and see how much more we can grow in height. In the US, they are incentivizing, and this isn't just relevant to substrates, but they're incentivizing US bio-based manufacturing and putting more capital, more infrastructure towards that. I pause because with the change of administration, potentially that may change. So, hopefully not. So we, I think we have to just think outside of our immediate sector and think of where are there parallels, where are there relevancies that it can be beneficial to us, because I don't think, to Alexander's point, until the government and the public at large is fully understanding in layman terms exactly what we do, they're not going to put a direct policy that'll fully benefit us immediately, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Anybody else wants to add?
Yeah, maybe just to add, and I don't think that's the way to go either. I think the way to go is illustrated by the example you just gave. So what do you want to achieve with your, what do you want to achieve growing up, not using as much land, not using as much water in agriculture, and then let the best technology win, whatever that might be. Yeah.
Maybe I can add a little bit to your request. In Europe, they're very keen on bio-based because it's renewable, and we fully agree, there's no discussion. The question is a little bit, is biodegradability is actually sort of a side business in that discussion. And if you realize that a lot of the bio-based polymers are non-biodegradable, the question is, should we go bio-based or should we go biodegradable? And for us, biodegradability is not just a box we have to tick, it's our starting point in innovating towards a new product. But we're a little bit hindered by the idea or by the perception that bio-based is the only good thing. And if you have to chop down a forest in Brazil to have bio-based ingredients for your maize, have you done the right thing? I mean, it's the same parallel as with the electrical cars.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that same example, because we're also looking at bio-based materials to replace the fossil ones we have. And we have actual cases where we don't choose a supplier because we know it's based on sugar from cane grown on cut rainforest. Now, is that more sustainable? No.
From GME's perspective, we deal with policy every day. Not me specifically, but Cecilia, who's in the audience, and my colleague Jeffrey. There are a lot of policy barriers. So there's a lot of themes in terms of research and how they talk about policy in terms of having a circular economy and supporting circular systems. And that's led to research on the reuse of growing media, for example. That's a very important one, is just simply reusing it and treating it. But there are actual policy and legislative barriers to using reused materials. So therefore they're saying, please do this, but we're not going to let you do it. There's issues as well with the fertilizing products regulation, which is this massive piece of legislation and growing media is within it. But very tiny details in an appendix can have massive influences on an entire sector because they didn't consult enough with experts. We've been involved somewhat, but sometimes they literally copy and paste legislation from somewhere else without considering the appropriate context. So policy is incredibly important for scaling up these new technologies and new techniques.
Yeah, now if I may add to that, from my own experience, I think we even have to take one step back and raise awareness for controlled environment agriculture in general, to tell the policymakers what it can do instead of what it cannot do. So there are a lot of people that are not aware of all the benefits, and then we can talk about growing media, maybe as part of that. But we have to speak up, and that's something, and here, to be honest, you're all an easy audience because we all know the story. It's a little bit like preaching to the converted. But we all have to we all have to make sure that we tell that story to policymakers, and we all know the story, and that's why we also need to collaborate. There's a level of story that we should all tell, and after that, I would say we need to go for fact-based decision making. So policymakers often know where to go, but they don't know how. And in the end, we have to keep in mind why we do it, and we want to move to a more sustainable food system. That's why people get up in the morning and do all the hard work. Not necessarily for us, but then for generations to come, of course. So, yeah, there's one more.
Okay.
Can you introduce yourself so we know who's asking the question?
Yes, for sure. My name is Leif. I am from Dakin Euro. My question is related to the 400% increase in the substrate market. It was mentioned from the panel. And the question is, what's the reason for this increase over the 4 years? Is it just...
Will you?
Yeah, so this was a study by Chris Block from Wageningen, and I believe that him and his team are working on another similar study, which will have even more detail about the drivers of growing media production going forward. But a lot of it is just increases in glasshouse growing, indoor growing. We need more growing media for there. A lot of it is driven by China. There was a recent scientific paper looking at greenhouses around the world, and it was something close to 80% of covered growing systems were in China. So it's this moving indoors and this need for more substrates for that. But then there's other factors like the plant-based diet. There's a whole range of things, but it's just massively increasing.
Yeah, I think the basics for the extrapolations are GDP growth, population growth, and a mix of different variables. And I would say whether it's 400 or 200, let's agree it's a big increase. There's a question behind you. Yep.
So my name's Omar. I'm from the United States. So in terms of awareness, and I think we're just dead last between you guys and Canada. So there's a lot of things that we do that don't make sense. You know, we're still the #1 exporter of almonds, but in the world, which requires a ton of water, which we do not have. But my point is, it's not as grim because I see you guys as really the leaders in the industry. There's a lot of awareness, which we lack in the States in terms of like sustainability. There's a lot of funds, I think, going into your government to educate the consumers. So make sure they're aware, because our whole sector is fantastic. We beautify the environment, we clean the air. There's a lot of positive things that we do within our sector, and I think that's lacking for like the last 40 years. Growers make money, they sort of hold on to it, or the cost is too high. They don't reinvest in the future, and I think that short-term thinking is gonna. We have to change that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Okay, as a last round for the panel, what if you would have a magic wand? It's your question, it's a nice question. If you would have and you can start then. If you would have a magic wand, what would you like to have tomorrow?
Yeah, I would really like to have more bio-based, already said it, biodegradable materials. And we are working with the industry who's making those polymers. It's going to happen, it's in the process. But as soon as we can get 100% biodegradable, we already are, but if we are going to be 100% bio-based, it will make our life a lot easier, and I think the whole industry will be a lot greener.
Okay, Tina?
I would just, and I mentioned this earlier, I would just say a lot of farmer to technologist conversation. Love to see the symposium done by anyone in this room. If not, maybe we'll have to host it, Farm Tech Society.
Yep.
But thank you for having me.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, there's a lot of big problems we can shake a magic wand at, Andre. But I think here, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I'd like to see a quicker adoption of these more sustainable cultivation techniques across the world. Yeah, I think that would not just help the viability of agriculture in those regions. It would help the environmental conditions of those regions, and of course it would help us. Right?
Thanks. Alex, 3 words.
I mean, for my role, just data. I really want the data of the whole system, of the whole food system, so then we can actually make good fact-based decision making at the top level, but we need a lot more to do that, but we're getting there, and I think we'll get there soon.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks for the panelists. Thanks. And thank you for attending. If there are any more questions, they're always here. So thanks.